Hi, this is Neil, Total Education with Neil. I'm really excited for another TV show, and I have finally a full-time co-host. And I thought, especially because you guys first got to visit my website, totaltour.net, to see what's been happening with the radio network of the Total Education Network, you'll learn how education has kind of grown in certain ways in almost the past 3.5 years. And my co-host started with me from the beginning, and I wanted to chat about it, but I also want to chat about the controversy in education. We've talked about specific things, special needs students, other issues with parenting and family, but we haven't talked about an issue that is on the news all the time, but maybe not always giving the truth. So I want to welcome my co-host, Jared. Jared, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing great. I have a public service announcement. I rode the subway all the way out here from downtown. Actually on the north side. What a wonderful ride going over the North Shore Connector. I would encourage anyone to give that a try. 30 minutes from the north side all the way out here. Read a book. It was wonderful.
So I think that's fantastic. So very interesting. So you were again being the kind of person.
That's my PSA for
PSA.
Yeah,
okay, that's fantastic
for the community.
For the community. I couldn't ride the train from where I'm at in the North Hills. That'd be a long trip.
Well, you could park downtown park on the north side I did.
Wouldn't that take me longer?
It would not.
Okay. So we're going to kind of banter back and forth, but specifically enough, we talk about when we started the Total Education Hour on 88.3 WRCT. Our whole thing was we discussed a lot of the news, which I've gone back in a lot of ways, but education is very controversial K through 12. And I think a lot of times it's forgotten or teachers are bashed and we really don't look at the issues. We get certain people that try to speak up, but we never get both sides.
Well, and that's unfortunately that is something that education shouldn't be controversial. It's something that is mandated for public education. It's something that really does need to be provided for everyone. We've seen the success stories of public education, so there shouldn't be any controversy. Yet there is. I know just 2 weeks ago, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette had a series of articles about intelligent design versus evolution, and the way the schools are trying to handle that. There was another element of controversy, which probably shouldn't need to be controversial, yet there it is in our public school system.
Which is the same thing that's happening. Again, we have these topics all the time on the show. I would say my viewers out there that have not tuned into the radio network, you're missing a lot. And we're just talking the education piece of Jason, the public school guy, and I going head-to-head, mano-a-mano, debating certain things, but we agree on a lot of things. My views have changed and shifted in a lot of ways. I don't want to tell the IRS I'm a conservative, but basically my views have absolutely changed in so many ways that I would say definitely I'm not a conservative when it comes to education. But there are issues that we want to cover on the show that a lot of people really don't understand. And I'm going to mention them, and they're going to be ones we'll talk about today. One's school vouchers. The other is school choice, the school choice movement in general with charter schools. We're also going to look at the standardized testing fight that we're under right now. We're going to look at things with Secretary Arne Duncan and game plans of ways to do that. There's so much more we could discuss. We talked about on the TV show, on the radio show last night, teacher formation. But it's a situation where if you look at charter schools, school vouchers, and teacher unions, I think that teacher unions, again, are getting a bad rap in certain ways, but other ways. But it's funny to hear you say public education, Jared, is fine and dandy. So that's a public service announcement right there by Jarrett and powered by Jarrett that public education is fine and dandy.
Well, certainly there are elements of it that absolutely need to be improved. And really, when you've talked about school choice, vouchers, standardized tests, we're looking at the foundational elements of education. Let's talk about the very first layer, and that's what we're really examining. And I think that's where the controversy lies. Not so much if we look at the school system as a kind of a brick and mortar kind of building with the foundation and then the first floor, second floor, third floor. That top floor is maybe the graduating student, but we need to go all the way back. And that's what our radio show started as and still is that advice for parents, that advice for caregivers, advice for teachers in a way that we can lay that foundational element down. And that's what we're looking at here. I think conservative groups, liberal groups, they have the best interests involved. They have the best interests in mind, and that is educating young students, educating students so that when they are 16, 17, 18 years of age, we're putting out adults or young adults that are ready to be out in the community. That's what we're talking about right here.
I want to shock people right now. I believe that the election was the way that President Obama won the election was education. I believe that Governor Romney's education plan was awful. It had no innovation. I'm not saying that President Obama's has been very, very good. And the promises that were set up, I even did some very, very interesting interviews with the governor of Rhode Island, Lincoln Chafee, and also had a very, very interesting conversation with the mayor of Philadelphia on my radio show, kind of hearing what President Obama's education plan what was going on. The problem is no one can get anything together. No one can. But I believe that education was the reason Governor Romney lost. He didn't have a strong education plan, and that's what Republicans in a lot of ways don't really value public education, and the ones, the talking heads, which leads to lots of things. And I think that's what also leads to not hearing the Republican side of things on certain radio shows, not hearing the Democratic, and if you're just listening to the radio, no one wants to bring up education because of the controversy.
And there comes that lies the critical foundational layer for the conservative, and I don't like to use labels when it comes to education because, again, I think all sides have the best, and I'm not being political here, I truly believe this. I believe that all sides have the best interests of children. And that's actually nice to see in today's world where everyone can at least agree they want what's best for someone. We don't always have those elements. But you hit something very important there. When you have a mistrust of or a distrust of big government,
right,
it's hard to be able to trust public education. And that was the element of Governor Romney's educational plan that was truly missing. Well, it was there, but he promoted or broadcasted that level of mistrust of big government involved in public education. Well, big government is involved in public education, and if we don't trust them to make good decisions, still leaving it up to the local school districts, but not every state runs the same way as Pennsylvania with local school districts. So there is a level of autonomy that Pennsylvania has that not every other state has. But you've really nailed it with that. How do you have a plan for public education when you don't trust the very people that are in charge of doing it?
The competition that has developed between the ed reformers and anti-ed reform and the teacher unions, because you have so many different elements involved in this. And we could take 3 or 4 shows, ladies and gentlemen, to go into this. And that's why, but again, it goes like this. Around and around since I've been in education for almost 10 years. It changes, but it goes and remains the same. Where we're heading now, I don't like it at all in public education. And I definitely want Jared to put his points apart, go into the situation when we talk about school vouchers. When we talk about...
we will. We'll definitely do that.
When we talk about charter schools. When we talk about the whole situation with ed reformers and teaching the test and how we evaluate teachers.
Well, there's no question. All of those are critical elements, and all of those, again, are the foundational elements of it. Foundationally, we're looking that our children are learning. We're looking that they're retaining knowledge. We're looking that they are able to problem solve. All of those are the foundational elements, part of the first floor, the ground floor of education. And then we're able to build upon that. But that starts at the kindergarten. Maybe we could even say it starts at preschool levels, 3 to 5, maybe even before that with early intervention, and 0 to 3, talking about the way the brain develops. Again, the key elements are here, for us to put that foundation out. And what we have done on our show right from the beginning is offered strong advice, strong plans. There needs to be a plan. The world has changed completely. I imagine that we've always had these controversies with public education. It's been around since the 1800s, maybe not when it first started, but I imagine there's always been that controversy. But today the world is so much more different. We have single families. We have grandparents raising children. We have community needs that have to be met by the school. We could bury our head in the sand.
Exactly.
We could put blinders on and say, hey, that's not my responsibility. Or we can address that the world has changed, and now we need to offer that.
The world has absolutely changed.
Or the United States has changed.
I'd say the world. And that's a great point you brought up. And that's where so our viewers out there are learning very, very quickly. As I always have to watch when I say listening audience or viewing audience. And then, again, it depends on specific things. But if you look at things, Jarrett, where we're going, where we're headed is going to be quite interesting, because it's an international competition. And are we making a mistake making it an international competition?
Well, I'm going to be controversial right now and right here. Let's throw out the word competition. I've talked about this before on our radio show, going back to 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, and for our television audience who has not had a chance to really tune into the radio show, they will learn that learning starts at the very beginning, from birth moving forward, and there's an incredible amount of learning that takes place without competition. When you have a 1-year-old who is learning to walk, there's no competition involved in there. It's not comparing that 1-year-old to the next person. So then why do we put competition in kindergarten? Why do we put it in first grade? We need to have, and we've talked about this on our radio show, and we're addressing it right here, we need to have a standard, a level. President Bush was criticized on so many levels for No Child Left Behind. But those words were wonderful words. No child left behind. Everybody learns. Maybe not at the same pace, maybe not at the same time, but everybody learns. I embrace that language. And certainly I shared very few political views with President Bush, but I embrace that language, because what he was saying is every child matters. And I thought that was wonderful to hear.
When we get back, now it's time to take apart each part. And I think the first part is the competition factor, standardized testing, and why we are teaching to the test. And it goes back to an international competition, which Jarrett doesn't agree with. You're watching Total Education with Neil, with my co-host Jarrett. We'll be back in just a moment.
Hey, you ready? Of course I am. What are you waiting for? I was waiting for you. So we're gonna continue the puppy thing real quick.
Okay, places everyone.
In a minute!
Do I have to do everything myself?
You can't do it all by yourself.
I'd say that...
Sure I can.
No, he can't. And neither can I. So why don't you come on down to BPTV and help us make some of the great community programs you see on this station every day.
Yeah!
I mean, we can help you make your TV show ideas a reality.
It's pretty awesome.
So come on down. I mean, I am pretty good, but I'm sure I could use your help.
We're back to Total Education with Neil, with my co-host Jarrett. And Jarrett, we're talking about something that's been part of my radio show network for 3.5 years. 1 hour on television is not going to, but it's going to give people the idea that I got to tune in. The internet, when people say, well, it's all podcasted on internet radio, guess what? You can listen to your iPhone while going to work. Forget about the regular radio stations unless we're on at 2 times. One is on Fridays at 4:30 on 88.3 FM and repeated on Thursdays at 9 a.m. on 88.3. And then the other one is 1080 WWNL at 7 a.m. on Saturday morning and 3 o'clock on Saturday morning. 2 different shows, 2 different formats, but you'll get a lot of the information. But now I want to go right into the whole thing we're going to talk about before, Jarrett. And that involves, first of all, standardized testing. Why President Bush implemented No Child Left Behind, where we have gone from here, why we're so concerned about things. And it goes back to the 60s. It goes back to Sputnik. It goes back to specific things that we always were competing with other countries. And once we saw our test scores drop with other countries, Jarrett, we panicked.
Good word, panic. But first, I need to address the whole thing about iPhone. I don't have an iPhone. I've never listened to a podcast. I hope that radio never goes away because boy,
They're going to be in the cars.
I will be in big trouble because I have no idea how to actually access a podcast.
The good news is that every car will have will have the World Wide Web on, so they'll all be able to access the internet.
And so our audience knows I embrace technology. I have a tablet, I have a Kindle, I have computers, I even use voice recognition software for the book that we're writing and putting together. I just don't get the whole internet radio thing. But I'm glad it's out there. I'm glad we're out there. That's where so many of our stations are, is on the internet. But you mentioned a word, panic. I'll even go one step further. I know Sputnik. When you first said it, I laughed. It sounded absolutely crazy when you said it. But then when you mentioned the word panic, it triggered the word fear. That's what we're looking at. I think that's what Americans, when it comes to education, are really deep down in their soul looking at fear. The fear of the unknown. Will my child learn? Are we going to be able to compete in this world market? And there again, competition in the world market, totally different set of circumstances. That's an economic system. Competition does not belong in the educational system. And I know that's controversial, and it's okay not to agree with that. But I'm going to explain why competition doesn't belong in there. But you mentioned Sputnik, and that was fear. That guided us to the space race. When the Soviets put that little tiny satellite that didn't do anything up into space, we reacted with fear. Fear's not necessarily a bad thing. It got us moving. We began moving in the direction that we wanted to go to reach space and compete with the Soviets. Competition with other countries, market system, that's okay. We don't need it in our educational system.
Well, let's see, I disagree, and listeners, viewers out there, I absolutely disagree. Competition is going to happen in education. The reason is, and we're not going to be able to compete through standardized testing, We have to compete through competency. Competency in college. Competency to go on and compete. Be able to compete with the global market that is competing for the top universities in America. And if our system continues in this, again, alarmist view of education. So let's just jump right. We said no child left behind. Right to no child left behind. Right. No child left behind. Again, it was a good law to a point, but here's what happened with NCLB. The problem was every child, and I already said 2014, mark your calendars, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be the, biggest moment in education and healthcare ever. 2014. Because in 2014, when it comes to education,
bold prediction.
Everyone has to be proficient on the test.
That's right.
Everyone. Do you think that's the craziest idea in the world?
It's revolutionary, absolutely.
Yes.
It could border on craziness, but a lot of revolutionary ideas. But let's go back to it. Let's address that. What is wrong with that? We've used this analogy on our radio show many times, but I want to jump into standardized testing and competition. You were a teacher. You're still in education. You provide an incredible service to so many people. I taught for 12 years before I moved over into child therapy. Which has been a wonderful career, and we highlighted the amazing life that has happened since then with my son and my family. But when we look at that, standardized tests absolutely have a role. This goes back to No Child Left Behind, but not a competitive. And this is so important for our listeners, I think, our audience to hear us say. Standardized testing does not need to be about competition. You're right. It's about proficiency. It's about competence. Your standardized test does not need to be matched to my standardized test. What it does need to be matched to, and parents, look at your child's standardized test forms when they come home. You can look at the percentages if you want to in grade equivalency. I would encourage you to look instead at mastery of skills. That's the element on the standardized test that is so important, and so many people overlook it. If your child is getting an A in arithmetic in 4th grade, but their standardized test comes back showing them that they have only mastered 2 out of the 4, and I don't want to get into too much technical jargon, but it's very easy to check. If they've only mastered 2 of the 4 domains or subcategories, they are not getting an A in mathematics. They are lacking in the foundations of mathematics. We talked about this. Grades don't matter. We can change. As a teacher, you can give partial credit. You can give extra credit. Grades don't matter. Throw the grades out. Go with mastery. When I look at a child, when I'm involved in therapy for a 2-year-old, I'm not giving them a grade. We're seeing if they have mastered that skill. How's it different?
It's different. And
tell our audience why it's different.
Speaking to my one producer for Beach Lifestyle Media telling me not to interrupt, this is where I want to interrupt. And that's a shout out to you, Marcus Reynolds. Now, seriously, Jared, you are now being a proponent of standardized testing.
I am. Absolutely.
Oh no!
Yes.
Oh wow!
It's very important. It's a excellent way to measure what a child is doing. You don't teach to the standardized test.
No.
We do not teach the standardized test because then it doesn't matter. The standardized test is not working the way it's supposed to.
This is not a debate on standardized testing. This is could lead us into so many more conversations on the TV show. The reason I do this is because, again, I am looking for guests for the TV show. It's much easier to pull any guest in the world on radio. So if you are in the watching audience and you want to be on the show and you are an educator or an author, please contact me at nhaley@totaltutor.org. And we'll definitely have you on. I'm going to have an APP bulletin out on certain topics. But when we're talking standardized testing, no. This has been the biggest problem. NCLB, this proficiency, I was waiting for you to say there is no way that every student can be proficient by 2014.
Of course there isn't. There is no way.
Where's the explanation at?
There is no way. But we need to at least have a line. We need to at least have a place to start. We need to have a starting line. We need to have a finish line. 2014 is our finish line. Everyone knows that it will not happen, but it's important to have a goal.
We need observation. You need to go
Absolutely.
observe the schools and see how terribly watered down they are right now based on what your premise is. Okay.
Not my premise.
No, but so I will continue this because, again, what roundtable discussions bring are sometimes is what we planned isn't going to happen, especially from a response. And Jared and I have not bantered like this in a while.
Are we out of time for this segment?
No,
Because
no,
you
we're
know
not.
where I'm going.
No,
You know where I'm going with this.
definitely. I know how to keep time.
I've used this analogy, this example, multiple times on our radio show. So many professions that we have standardized tests. They have forms of competency. An airplane pilot has an entire checklist of things that they do before that plane even leaves the ground. To a degree, that's a standardized form. That's a standardized test. It has to meet a criteria. Do the engines start? Yeah, it's a pretty good idea. Are the flaps working? Yeah, we better make sure they're working or we're going to have some trouble when we get up into the air, if we get up in the air. But now I want to go back to the one that I think is most important. A few years ago when Captain Sullenberg landed the plane in the river,
Yes.
flying it over a bridge, under a bridge, but landing
Right.
a huge plane
Yeah,
in this
absolutely.
tiny river. Now, we've had this discussion many times. His point was anybody could do that. Any pilot who was proficient. When I get on an airplane, I want to feel confident that any pilot could land that airplane right into the river if necessary. Not that he was the only one, but he was someone who could do it like any other pilot. That's what we're looking for our students. We're looking for our students to say anyone. Many people have argued with me about that analogy, but yet I have confidence that any pilot feels that they could do that. Why? Because they've been trained, they've been skilled, and they have a level of mastery that they must meet every single time. That's what we're looking to put into public education.
The problem is you have the people creating these tests for states so that they don't look bad. You have certain
You're right.
certain things. That's where Common Core standards comes in. A lot of people, but we're not going to talk about that. I am starting to write down topics that we could talk about. One of the hardest things when you do television, guys, is you can't have notes unless Dave Cable can come out and get us some cue cards. So that most people have cue cards and are reading off cue cards the entire time. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. So that's the difficulty of television to radio. You can have your talking points, you can have your certain situation, but I'm going to give a little editorial before we take a break. And this editorial is this. I cannot believe Jared is talking about standardized tests. I am a proponent of ending standardized testing. Jared, my buddy Jason, the public school guy as well, ending standardized testing. Now, measuring skills is in a standardized manner that doesn't involve what we're doing in testing, I'm for. We're not going to talk about this today because I want our viewers to see what we talk about each week for 2 hours a week arguing certain aspects of these concepts. But one thing I really want to talk about involving this is just the ridiculousness of Jarrett's commentary about standardized testing. This has ruined public education. Remember, Jared said everything's okay with public education. Well, I'm going to paint a picture that's different. He needs to go observe those classrooms. He needs to interview all those teachers that are really just sick and tired and aggravated of what's going on. And so he'll see when his son moves on to other grade levels the truth about public education, the truth about the lack of funding in public education. So when we get back, I have to kind of address more of the standardized testing ridiculousness of 2014. Didn't think I would talk about, I've never had anyone argue back at me saying, I agree with standardized testing in NCLB. Well, Jared has. You're watching Total Education with Neil, and we'll be back in just a moment. We're back with Total Education with Neil, and I surprised Jared as quickly as possible involving this because we are rolling. And he says, let's get out of standardized testing. Oh, no. When you get in a roundtable discussion, Jared, we might not cover certain aspects of it, but I am not going to, and I know our viewers out there are shocked saying, the great questioner, well, you have to listen to the entire network to hear my opinionation on my Q&A show on the network with Maggie Stevens from the Parent Fix. We're looking to try to get that show on terrestrial radio all over the place too. And I could just imagine Jarrett in the Q&A and hearing some of the answers to the questions that I bring every week to the network. But Jason and I news, maybe Jason's brainwashing me. But listen here, standardized testing, we are really running into an issue that's all that they care about. So you cannot. But let me give you a point. 2014, I want you to answer this question. You have not answered this question. Okay. And here's the question. The question's in 2014, Jared. 2014, everyone has to be proficient on the test. That is not possible.
Well, I think I have answered that question, but I will.
You reiterated.
I will repeat it because I'm not sure that you were listening when I said that. But I did answer this question, and simply put, of course, it's not going to be met. There is absolutely no way that can be met. It's 1 year away. We're not going to get there.
Why is it not going to be met?
It isn't going to be met because we will not be able to get everyone up to that level. Ever? Again, we've talked about this, and this is so important. Because a child doesn't demonstrate skills at 8 years of age, doesn't mean that they are not going to demonstrate those skills at 9 years of age. But here's the critical element. If a child is not, and here's the importance of standardized tests. Again, avoid the age equivalency, the grade equivalency. Avoid those. Those don't matter in a standardized test. What matters is what is your child, your child, your children, my child, what are they showing a mastery of skills? There's no competition in that level of a standardized test. It's not about who has the higher percentage. It's about a level of mastery of skills, and that's what's important. If your child has not learned their multiplication tables and they are in 3rd grade, and yet they're still managing to bring home an A in mathematics, they're going to have a very difficult time moving on to mathematics in 4th grade, 5th grade. There's the value of a standardized test. We can look at those elements. A teacher may absolutely miss those if they are providing simply input by grades. But when we're looking at the ability to rationalize numbers, to understand concepts, to put together multiplication as groups, as fast adding. And again, we're moving on to some teacher jargon and some educational kind of specifics that may not really matter to our audience. But what I am really putting out there for our audience is that standardized tests have a role. Are they the only role? Absolutely not. And that's what I want to be clear about. So to answer your question, will we make it by 2014? No, we're not going to make it by 2014. Could we make it by 2015?
Never.
Perhaps.
Here's the never.
But see, I'm an optimist. I'm an optimist. I'm not sure you are.
He's drinking the Kool-Aid of public education, ladies and gentlemen. The problem is with the premise of No Child Left Behind is everyone, regardless of disability, regardless of anything involving their special needs can be, and it's not possible. The reason it's not possible is because we've not allowed everyone to be able to take an alternative state assessment. We have not, that are not meeting the criteria. We have not been able to measure students' progress individually. That is one of the biggest problems.
And now you've changed the direction of the conversation, and I will agree with you on all of those. That there needs to be an element of diversity within the standardized test. In which is a contradiction. How can you have standards when you're allowing for diversity? But you're right. You cannot have just one grand form, one grand test for everyone, because not everyone learns the same. So there does need to be diversity. There does need to be modifications in the standardized test. Because again, the role is not about what examining in a competitive atmosphere. What we're looking at is mastery. I happened to take a class about about 4 years ago, a sign language class at the Community College of Allegheny County, CCAC. And here's what I was most impressed with CCAC. I have a master's degree, I've started PhD programs, and yet I was in a classroom with students that were involved in modified learning. They had assistants, they had aides with them in that classroom. A number of my classmates, they had a problem with that, because they were looking at it as a competitive nature. Why should they get that and I don't? That's unfair. And my response was, it's not competitive at all. You have your thing going, I have my thing going. It's about learning. If that's what that person needs to be able to become proficient at sign language, I'm all for it. Yet, there were standards that we had to meet. Everyone in that classroom had to meet certain standards that were developed by the teacher within the school framework.
What is amazing is when I thought I'd bring up President Bush's NCLB, if we took a poll of teachers, parents, administrators, how many of them would be for the whole standardized testing thing? I'd say 25% of the entire country. The problem is that Republicans' goal is to eliminate public education in general, especially the Tea Party. Democrats want to show that public education is strong and that we can reform it. And then you have your teacher unions that absolutely are against both things. And now they're fighting for the other. What I'm saying, Jared, is none of those will be proficient if we don't have the right measurements and standards.
Absolutely. Okay. There's no question. We're in agreement with that.
But what the reason for the standardized testing was the PISA. And unbelievably enough, we can go into standardized testing this entire show because unbelievably enough, we're almost already halfway through and even more just on standardized testing. I have topics for the next couple months, which is amazing. But if you tune in every day, you can find out what's going on. Listen, here's the point. And I feel like it is Hannity and Colmes. It really is, and that's funny. Jason and I are pardoning the interruption. PTI, the way we do things in our...
Sure, that's the cool show. We're the nerdy show. Okay.
No.
All right, thanks a lot.
No, the great ratings show. The great ratings show. He kicked Colmes off. And Hannity's ratings are better now. So look out, Jared. No, but listen, and I'm shifting my camera, and I'm sure my camera people are like, oh my gosh, because this is different. This is can become more of an argument. The PISA, the reason why we're doing the standardized testing is so that we measure their progress so that we can perform well on the PISA. And that's the international test, where we rank 27th in mathematics. I don't know the numbers. We rank 35th in science, and our numbers are just awful. But there's no oversight involving the PISA. Certain countries decide the brightest and best.
Correct.
They have a smaller pool to choose from compared to the United States. So that's the problem. That's where we're nervous. So now we have to hold the teachers accountable, Jared.
Of course.
We have to hold the administrators accountable.
Of course.
And the only way to do that is teaching to a test.
Absolutely not. There are so many other ways to hold people accountable than teaching to a test. We could. I think we have really put our ideas out there. I think our audience has absolutely heard them loud and clear. I'm in agreement with you. Standardized test is only one element of developing or getting the total picture of a student's mastery of skills and of knowledge. It's simply one element. It's an important element. As far as the international testing, don't pay attention to it. If other countries are not...
Sorry, that's not going to happen.
Right, because we again look at fear. And I would also argue this, if we're not sure about the numbers, I don't think I'd put any numbers out there. But that's just me looking for accuracy.
Okay, so that's what the Philadelphia mayor said, we're ranked so-and-so in mathematics. Well, I mean, like I said before, it's in the 30s, it's in the 40s. What's it matter? We're not number one, Jarrett.
Exactly. And so don't pay attention to those. Again, focus on mastery. If the other countries are not operating by the same rules, then it's not a valid test. If everyone is not, and we've talked about this in education, there needs to be validity. There needs to be ways of measuring skills, holding teachers accountable. We talk all the time about parents being accountable for their children. Teachers also need to be accountable for the children they're educating. As a child therapist, I'm held accountable for what I provide for families. I really work hard to provide the best options, the best strategies for families. This show has grown and been built by the foundation that we started with, and that was providing knowledge, insight, years of learning that you and I did, starting at undergrad, going to our graduate studies at Duquesne University, a wonderful college university for education, and then educating ourselves as we progressed. Were our ideas controversial? And when we taught, absolutely. Are my ideas controversial as a therapist? Yeah, pretty much. Do they work? A lot of the times they do. Do they work all the time? No, they don't work all the time at that particular moment. Will they work later on? They may very well do that. That's what I'm putting forth to our audience. We need a broad picture, a long-term picture. 2014 is just not far enough down the line.
So we can continue with that 2014 thought. And now I've taken the focus a little differently. I guess we're going to have part 2 of what we talk about on my radio network, TotalTutor.net, for more information. Twitter, Total Tutor. You could just go ahead and tweet me right now. I'll be able to check it out and tweet back, or Facebook Neil S. Haley. Friend me there. When we get back, more Total Education with Neil with Jarrett. We'll be back in just a moment.
Illegal is illegal, and that's what we have to take care of at the border. Why don't they put blimps up? I think one of the issues is flying airplanes is going to cost money. So I'd throw out, put a blimp up there, run blimps from both sides of the fence line, and they run probably at a very...
How can Mr. Bolt have it so wrong? That is one of the worst ideas I have ever heard. Wait, what's this story? Military surveillance blimps tested at the Texas-Mexico border? Bolt had it right all along. Oh man, never gonna hear the end of this one.
Good morning, this is Mr. Bold calling for Mr. Dave Cable. Back in 2006, Mr. Bold was on Bethel Park right now, and if Mr. Bold recalls correctly, he was poo-pooed by Mr. Dave Cable back in 2006 for really being a wacko when it comes to suggesting blimps along the border. I told you back then that I hoped that I never saw anything official using the word blimp. Well, much to my enjoyment, the word blimp has been used in an official article when they talk about patrolling the borders. It's unfortunate that Bethel Park doesn't have any billboards, because Mr. Bull would be looking for some type of public apology from Mr. Dave Cable regarding his poo-pooing of the suggestion of using blimps to control the borders. I await your call. Thank you.
I deserve that.
We're back with Total Education with Neil, with my buddy Jarrett, even though we have not been kumbaya so far, but you have to listen to the program to understand why we feel this way. There's tons of podcasts for you to listen to, or live radio on the 2 local stations in Pittsburgh, and we're happy, thanks to BP TV, for having us, give this opportunity. We love Bethel Park. And thank you again. Now let's go and Dave Cable. Let's go right specifically. This is where I'm going. I said the piece up. Well, now, because we're ranked so terribly, we start looking at standardized testing, and we start saying certain school districts aren't performing well. So we go into this big process of we got to allow school choice. We're not serving the urban community. We're not serving the rural community. We got to make changes so school choice develops out of the Republican Party and possibly certain Democrats, even though unions would say these Democrats aren't Democrats at all. Is that a good idea? Because of the alarmist of your standardized testing that started with NCLB led to education reform.
Well, certainly educational reform started way beyond No Child Left Behind. Educational reform, again, has been part of public education from the inception of public education. There are many people that argued in the very beginning of public education that it was unnecessary, that it was the parents' sole responsibility to educate their child. I always think choice is important. One of the foundations for language and cognitive development is providing your young child with choices. Do you want juice? Do you want milk? Even before they can even communicate. It's a choice, not a big choice, but it is a choice. I think it matters that we need to have choices within the educational system. Do I like the idea of the way school choice is offered within different political systems? Not particularly, because quite honestly, there's no real choice that is out there for some of the most disenfranchised of those within our economic community. Now, are there choices for those people that have more economic resources? Absolutely. Now we've moved away from the American system. When we have choices for some people and no choices for other people, we've now moved away from the egalitarian system that the United States is founded on. So am I for choice? Absolutely. Do I believe that we all need to have those choices? Absolutely.
Well, so the school choice movement stems from, and you don't believe this, the huge education reform school choice movement stems from the standardized testing. Because they look at how many kids are not able to read in certain districts. Mm-hmm. Certain schools in Philadelphia, 70% of the kids are illiterate. You have schools in Cleveland where you have 60% illiterate, cannot read when they graduate from high school. We see these things through the standardized testing. So that's i.e. why we decide to do certain things in education reform. Let's first go one of the biggest proponents and that was charter schools. And like I said, we can go into directions and continue these conversations, but I want to bring on experts for every one of them in the studio to talk about it and hit them with the hard questions. Charter schools. I was such a proponent of them, but I'm not anymore because they have a great idea. They give parents another choice.
Right.
It's public education, not private. The high standards, parental involvement. Problem is, the people running them are for-profit institutions. You can't have for-profit in public education, in my opinion.
So you agree with me to throw out the element of competition. For-profit is a competitive aspect of the way our economic system works. So and it's based on competition. So that the for-profit school mode is working under the part of the element of you want us because we're better than anybody else around. Competition. Now, we've talked about the benefits of different schools for different children. Again, I like the idea of the charter schools because it is publicly funded. Does it need to be modified? Absolutely. Charter schools do not need to take every student that is within that area. Public schools do. Now, public schools have options within their school system for students that might have challenges that are more difficult to manage, but charter schools, they don't need to do that. Because they are publicly funded, they do need to change the way that they admit students, take students, what they're able to do. But have they provided a valuable resource for communities, especially communities where you have mentioned in urban school districts where children are not learning? Again, not all the parents' fault, not all the teachers' fault, but there's blame everywhere. And how did we identify those elements of it? Through standardized testing. I might argue that many of those students were probably getting B's and C's in their reading classes. How could they have moved on? Yet standardized testing helped us identify that. Now, with the voucher or with the charter school system, again, a good idea. Do I think they should be for profit? Not necessarily. Could they be nonprofit status and still serve that community? Absolutely.
They probably wouldn't do a good job, but
I think they would do a good job. Again, that's the optimism that I have and that I'm not sure that you share with that. I think they could do it. There's plenty of nonprofit organizations. In fact, there's amazing nonprofit organizations that meet the needs of so many communities and so many people, and they're not for profit.
The problem is, non-for-profit, we figure out ways to make money as well. That's
It's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean you can't make money as a nonprofit. I'm kind of okay with that too. You know, it's good for a nonprofit to have a cash reserve.
Exactly. One of my sponsors again for Feed the Kids. We have to really. That's a great
right.
opportunity. What they do for Feed the Kids. Jared, what charter schools, the problem is with for-profit is, again, the unfairness of this is that they're honestly looking at the bottom line. So when there's competition involving businesses, there are shortcuts that are met. It's shortcuts that don't take the children into consideration, don't take the neighborhood schools they're competing in into consideration. Story, good friend, Bronx teacher, good old Bronx. His school he's teaching at, he is, I guess, downstairs. Upstairs is a charter school.
Okay.
In the same building. 2 different doors to go in and out. I don't know how it works. But, yes, this is good old Mayor Bloomberg.
Just make sure which door you're going.
This is good old Mayor Bloomberg. And he's, finally, he's 16 years he's gone. And that's what they allow in New York City. You could be the mayor for 16 years. So basically, Mayor Bloomberg, that is one of his pushes with charter schools. So you have the same building operations. People could choose to enroll in either school. And it's a very, very sketchy situation going on. What I'm bringing up is a lot of times these charter schools are looking at the bottom line. They're not paying their teachers as well as the public school pays them. They are putting them under a tremendous amount of pressure. Yes, they're performing well, but I wonder how many of those teachers last in the profession for a long time. And there goes the IE of standardized testing. I guarantee you're not going to see many 30-year teachers anymore. You're going to burn them out in 5 to 6.
That might be, but boy, you are really obsessed about this whole standardized test. Somehow we keep going back to that as our topic.
Exactly. I didn't plan this, but again, look at we're saying.
Again, let's talk about what we're providing for students, and let's go back for young people. I think even though we have political parties that seem to be on opposite sides of this, again, the intention is clear that they have the interest of the child in mind here, and that's why charter schools were developed. Are they run with a for-profit attitude? Probably most of them, maybe all of them, but at least the intention was there to provide a choice for some of the most disadvantaged communities that are out there.
Well, okay, and that's true. That's actually true, Jarrett, but I don't know. So let's go school vouchers real quick, and then we're close to running out of time, which is amazing, but we're going to have to go into more of the areas. I think I said I wanted to touch upon all the areas, and I think we touched upon everything, standardized testing, school vouchers, but there's so much more to go into. Secretary Arne Duncan, President Obama, the direction we need to go in education. So let's go into the school voucher thing. I'm a big proponent of school vouchers. Here's Jason, the public schools guy's reason he doesn't agree with them. The reason he doesn't agree with them, and this is because you're funding private institutions, mostly parochial schools, with public money, which the whole separation of church and state.
I'd even go further beyond that. Vouchers, they don't go far enough. I don't believe in vouchers, so I'm firmly standing with the no side of this. There's a lot of elements to vouchers that I would think that the Republican Party would probably disagree with, and that would be the first one is vouchers are federally funded, or at least the proposals are federally funded. and you have the federal government telling you what to do with the money that they are giving you. I would think that that would be a huge constitutional restriction that Republicans would absolutely argue. So to put it into simple terms, you have a voucher for $1,000. The federal government is telling you where you can put that $1,000. So I hand you $1,000. Have I really given you $1,000 if I've said you have to use it this way? So there's a restriction there that I'm not sure is even constitutionally correct. I'm not sure that that can be done. The federal government doesn't give you your tax refund. I know you make a lot more money than me. You may not get a tax refund. I happen to get a tax refund. Federal government doesn't tell me you have to use this tax refund right here. Yet a voucher system does. Different than a tax credit. Now, if we want to argue tax credits, I still don't agree with it, but that's different than a voucher system because someone is telling you where that money has to go. There's an element of unfairness there where you are telling someone, you're telling a school, you can get this money. Not this school, but this school can get this money. So there's an element with vouchers that there's many elements within the voucher system that really have to be examined. And then you do have the separation of church and state. But again, voucher systems go beyond parochial schools. They're an option for all independent schools where voucher systems are in place. So, you know, the separation of church and state argument, it's part of it, but it's not a really valid argument because the element that there are so many other independent schools. In fact, you could argue that parochial schools are going way down the list of options as parents have for schooling their child. So voucher systems, here's the other reason they don't work. Who benefits? I'll ask our audience. Who benefits from a voucher system? You get a check for $1,000.
It's not 1,000. It's not. It's more than 1,000. But we have to stop.
$1,500.
Not much more than that. A lot more than that. You're looking at some of the poorest ones we're going to get in Pennsylvania, 7 to 8 grand. But we're just going to go. So we're not going to get into that because it did not pass. But we are
That's
running
right.
out
That's
of time.
why we can't get
You
into
got to
it.
go to TotalTutor.net for more information and listen to all the banter between Jason, the public school guy, and Jarrett, and all the great education talk. Total Tutor for Twitter, Neil S. Haley Facebook. Have a great month. We'll talk next month. And I definitely want you to email me at edhaley@totaltutor.org. Good day, everyone.
Once you figure out how to speak your kids' language, well, you don't really have to say much at all. From the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.